Hello, everybody. Welcome to another weekly Ask Melly segment, the show where I show you how to take control of your life the feminine way by embracing the strength within your emotional cycles. Now, on this week's segment, we had a really great question last week about overwhelm. So we're going to look at empathy overload, how to support others and not take on their emotions. Now, I really want to talk about this one because as bright, sensitive, creative, and spiritual women, this is something we experience a lot. We're just naturally very empathic. So we naturally feel others' pain and joy. It's a very beautiful and, to me, a very natural gift that a lot of women hold. But that empathy overload can turn the strongest of our gifts into the deepest of our wounds. And I know this is something a lot of people, especially in the spiritual community, feel quite deeply. Now, the struggle when it comes to this is that when we take on too much of other people's emotions, it ends up becoming a major contributor towards our cycles of depression and anxiety. We all feel it. And you know what it's like when you've been around somebody who is extremely emotional, who's not processing things properly. You feel on edge. It heightens your nervous system as well. So by the time you leave, you are overloaded from being in their presence. And that's what can turn the best and most amazing empaths, it can drive them to turn that off. And when we turn off our empathy, especially when it is a beautiful part of who we are, we end up becoming a shell of ourselves. We become numb to what's happening around us. And to me, when we're numb like that, we're turning off our capacity to love others. Now, my experience with this is that ever since I was a kid, I naturally felt others and animals' emotions. Oh, sorry, guys. So ever since I was a kid, I naturally felt others' emotions, animals as well. And I don't remember a time when I didn't. This is going right back ever since I was a child. But the problem was I never knew how to deal with it. And I never knew how to separate myself. I never understood what was theirs and what was mine. And the funny thing is that I wasn't fully aware that this was happening until I had my daughter, and watching her live out the same experience that I had, watching her be in this beautifully happy and exuberant mood, then being around particular people, and all of a sudden she was an emotional wreck, and looking at her going, what's going on? And realizing that she had absorbed other people's emotions and didn't know what to do with it. She couldn't separate her emotions from theirs. So that gave me this beautiful reflection of my own childhood, of my own experiences, and allowed me to step forward then, because then I could identify that I actually shut off my empathy in my early teens. I stepped into this mindset of, well, if I don't care, then I can't feel, then I don't have pain anymore. So I just shut it off. I just shut off my empathy. And I don't know where or how I learned it. I don't think it was anybody in particular that said it, but I just learned to prevent that empathy overload by blocking the energy. I would block the emotion entirely, like putting up a boundary around myself and going, no, nothing comes in. And although it never felt right for me, shutting that feeling down, it never quite felt right. But I don't know, it was just something that I'd learned. Maybe it was a societal thing at the time. But as I matured, and as I said, watching my daughter develop it as well, her gift, her empathy was so beautiful. I didn't want her to shut that down. And then I went to tell her how to deal with it and realized I was about to tell her how to block it, and realized that wasn't the solution either. So as I matured, I realized that blocking my empathy was having a mirror effect. It wasn't working, but what it was actually doing was blocking my empathy towards myself. I was blocking my greatest gift of all, my ability to love myself and my ability to feel that love for myself. So after that, I went against something that we're taught. I went against all of it. And instead of blocking, I let it all in. Now, I know this may seem like completely counterintuitive to what you would think you have to do when it comes to empathy overload. But here's what happened. It changed my life. Letting it in instead of using my energy to block it changed everything, because I wasn't using energy to block anymore. So that energy had to go somewhere else. So I used that energy to process instead. So instead of pushing away, I used the emotion, my empathy, to allow it to flow through me instead. And it was funny, when I first started doing that, I realized it was impossible for me to not take on other emotions. It's a huge part of who I am, to tap into what other people are feeling and process that. So to block it, I wasn't actually blocking anything. I thought I was, but what I realized was it was impossible for me to block it. So what I needed to do was learn how to process it. I needed to learn how to let it flow. And this is where stages of self was actually developed. So every time these emotions would come through, whether they were mine or somebody else's, I had to move through it. I had to address the fear. What was the fear around this emotion? Did it come from a base need of not being seen, not being heard? Did it come from a base need of somewhere else? Then I had to forgive myself for feeling this fear, forgive myself for taking on this other person's emotion, forgive myself for being in that place. Then I had to find the self-belief and say, I'm going to be okay. I can move through this. I can process this fear, this emotion. I can process my empathy, and it will not destroy me because I've done this before and I can do it again. And then I would step into the future possibilities and go, well, once I've processed this, what will life look like? What will I look like? How will I feel? How will the other person feel once this is processed? And then I would take action. And funny thing is, we think taking action is this big, grand thing, but it can be as simple as just having a conversation. That taking action can be as simple as saying, I feel this. Is that what's going on for you? And just like that, your empathy becomes a beautiful gift. But to be very, very clear, processing the empathy instead of blocking it is just a small part of preventing empathy overload. So the other things I had to do was to get very, very clear on my values and my boundaries. And one of those values being that I wouldn't block empathy anymore. It didn't work for me. It felt wrong, and it went against what I believe in. To me, blocking empathy is blocking my gifts. It's blocking love. To me, you don't block energy, you work with it. So I had to learn not to block. That was a big value that I put on myself. That was a boundary I placed for myself, that I wouldn't block the energy. I would allow it in. But I also had to learn that it wasn't my responsibility to be the sponge to the world's pain. And with that came this beautiful awareness that if I wasn't responsible for everybody else's pain, then it's up to everyone else to process their own pain. It's up to them to process their own empathy. It's not up to me. The only person I'm responsible for, the only person I can control is myself and my own emotional processes. So it made it very clear for me then what was mine to carry and what was not. So it also made me realize with that I couldn't do the processing for other people. I had no control over them doing the processing. It wasn't up to me to do it for them, but they didn't know how to either. And it was then that I realized I had to show them. I had to help people understand not to block their empathy and in turn the love for themselves, but move through it, process their empathy rather than blocking. That's why I'm here today. That's why I'm doing the work that I do. Now, if you need any help moving through and understanding your emotions so you can take control of your life the feminine way, then I invite you to explore more about the stages of self at mellys.com.au. And in the meantime, I am looking forward to connecting with you all on the brand new app. So once again, jump over to mellys.com.au to grab your access, exclusive access, I should say, to the app, where you get daily affirmations, journal prompts, and inspiration, and have conversations just like the one we're having right now. I will see you all next week. Love and kindness, everyone. Mwah.